The conference room at Henderson and Associates buzzed with laughter and clinking glasses. 40 years of service deserved a proper send-off, and my colleagues had gone all out. Silver balloons spelled happy retirement across the back wall, and a massive sheet cake sat centered on the table, decorated with a briefcase and the words "Enjoy your freedom." I stood near the window, tie loosened, accepting handshakes and well wishes from people I'd worked alongside for decades. My boss, Gerald, had just finished a speech about my dedication and reliability. Never missed a deadline, never complained, always the first one in and the last to leave, he'd said. The words made me uncomfortable, but they were true. I'd built my entire life around being dependable. My wife stood across the room, elegant in a navy dress I didn't recognize. She'd been distant lately, but I'd attributed it to stress. Our 3 adult children clustered around her, our oldest son, 28, fresh from his MBA program I'd quietly funded. Our daughter, 25, who just finished medical school on scholarships I'd spent years helping her secure. And our youngest, 23, working at a startup after the expensive computer science degree I'd made possible. Speech! Speech! Someone called out, and soon the whole room joined in. I raised my hands, laughing. All right, all right. The room quieted. I'm not much for speeches, but I want to say that these 40 years taught me what matters most. It's not the cases won or the hours billed. It's knowing that every day, you're building something, a legacy, a foundation for the people you love. Everything I did, every late night, every weekend at the office, it was all for. Stop. My wife's voice cut through the room like ice. Everyone turned. She stepped forward, her heels clicking against the tile floor with deliberate precision. In her hand was a manila envelope. "I'm sorry to interrupt," she said, her voice steady and rehearsed, "but I can't let this charade continue. I can't stand here and pretend anymore." The room fell into an uncomfortable silence. Gerald started to say something, but she held up her hand. "We've been married for 32 years, she continued, addressing the room as much as me. 32 years of being invisible. Of raising children alone while he prioritized everything else. Of birthdays forgotten, anniversaries ignored, recitals and games missed. Of being a ghost in my own home." My heart hammered. "What are you doing?" "What I should have done years ago." She walked toward me, envelope extended. "These are divorce papers. I've already signed them. I'm done living a half-life, waiting for scraps of attention. I want a fresh start. A real life. I'm 60 years old, and I finally realize I deserve happiness." I stared at the envelope, unable to move. Around us, my colleagues shifted uncomfortably. Some looked away. Then I heard it. Clapping. My oldest son started it, his applause slow and deliberate. "Good for you, Mom. Finally." My daughter joined in, tears streaming down her face. "You deserve so much better." My youngest nodded, arms crossed. About time someone said it. They were applauding. My children were applauding my humiliation. I looked at each of them, searching for some sign of the kids I'd sacrificed everything for. The son whose college debt I'd paid off secretly so he could start his career unburdened. The daughter whose medical school applications I'd personally edited at 3 in the morning, night after night. The youngest whose passion for technology I'd nurtured, buying him his first computer when money was impossibly tight. "You all agree with this?" My voice came out hoarse. "Dad, you were never there," my daughter said, wiping her eyes. "Mom raised us. She was at every event, every milestone. Where were you?" "Working," I whispered. "I was working for yourself," my oldest interrupted. "For your career. Mom told us how it really was. The choices you made. How you always put yourself first." The room spun. This couldn't be happening. Not here. Not like this. My wife pressed the envelope into my hand. "Sign them. Let's both finally be free." I took the envelope with numb fingers and walked out of my own retirement party to scattered whispers and pitying looks, the sound of my children's applause echoing in my ears. 3 months passed in a blur of grey. I signed the papers within a week. What was the point of fighting? The house sold quickly, the market was good. My wife took her half and moved into a downtown condo. I found a modest apartment near the lake, a place where the silence felt appropriate rather than oppressive. None of the children called. Not once. I'd reach for my phone a dozen times a day, compose messages I'd never send. "I'm sorry" seemed inadequate when I didn't fully understand what I was apologizing for. "I love you" felt hollow when it clearly hadn't been enough. So I said nothing and lived in the quiet I'd supposedly chosen. Work friends reached out initially, awkward lunch invitations, carefully worded texts checking in. I declined politely until they stopped asking. Gerald sent a fruit basket with a card that read simply, "Thinking of you." I appreciated the gesture but couldn't bring myself to respond. The apartment became my world. I'd wake at 5:30 from habit, make coffee, and sit by the window watching the sunrise over the water. Sometimes I'd pull out the boxes I'd brought from the house, the only personal items I'd claimed. Photo albums, school reports, handmade Father's Day cards with crayon drawings and misspelled words. Evidence of a life I apparently remembered differently than everyone else. One morning, my phone rang. An unknown number. I almost didn't answer. "Dad." My daughter's voice, but different. Shaky. "Sweetheart." I sat up straighter, heart racing. "Is everything okay?" She paused. "I'm at Mom's condo. Can you come? Please." "Of course. What's wrong?" "Just come. Now." The drive downtown took 20 minutes that felt like hours. My mind raced through possibilities. Was she sick? Hurt? In trouble? The condo building was new, all glass and steel. I'd never been inside. My daughter buzzed me up, and when the elevator doors opened on the 14th floor, all three of my children stood waiting in the hallway. Their faces were blotchy, eyes red. My oldest had his arm around his sister. The youngest leaned against the wall, looking lost. "What happened?" I looked between them. "Where's your mother?" "Inside," my daughter said quietly. "With Richard." "Who?" "Her boyfriend." My oldest's jaw clenched. "The man she left you for. Turns out he's been around for a while." The words hit like a physical blow. "What?" "2 years, Dad." My daughter's voice cracked. "They've been together for 2 years. We found emails. Messages. She's been planning this whole thing, and he encouraged her to take you for everything she could get." "We need to show you something," the youngest said. "We found boxes in the storage unit. Mom's boxes. We were helping her organize, and we found." He trailed off, shaking his head. They led me inside. The condo was expensively furnished, modern and cold. In the living room, cardboard boxes lay open, contents scattered across the coffee table and floor. Letters. Dozens of them. Letters I'd written to my wife over the years, pouring out my heart, explaining the pressures at work, the financial struggles I'd hidden from everyone, my fears and hopes for our family. Letters where I'd begged her to tell me what was wrong, how to fix us. Bank statements showing the second mortgage I'd taken out to pay for our oldest's MBA program, a program my wife had told me she'd funded through her inheritance. A diary, my wife's handwriting filling page after page. I picked it up with shaking hands. "He'll never suspect," one entry read. "He's too busy trying to be the hero, working himself to death. He doesn't see that I checked out years ago. Richard makes me feel alive again. Young. The kids believe everything I tell them about their father. It's almost too easy. By the time I'm ready to leave, they'll be completely on my side." Another entry, dated 2 months before my retirement party, Richard suggested making it public at his retirement celebration. He says the humiliation will make him more agreeable during the divorce proceedings. It's cruel, but he's probably right. And honestly, after all these years of boredom, I deserve a little drama. I couldn't breathe. The room tilted. "Dad." My daughter took my arm, steadying me. We confronted her. She just left with Richard. She said we're adults now and she doesn't owe us any explanations. We believed her, my oldest whispered. We believed everything she said about you. We clapped while she destroyed you in front of everyone. I looked at my children, really looked at them, and saw the devastation in their faces. They'd discovered that the foundation of their understanding had been built on lies. There's more, my youngest said quietly, pulling out a folder. We found the receipts, Dad. For everything. The receipts painted a picture I'd tried so hard to keep hidden. Every sacrifice documented in fading ink and careful notations. My daughter held up a payment plan from her medical school. You told me I got a full scholarship. You got a partial scholarship, I said quietly. You earned that. The rest. I worked it out with the school. Payment plans, extra shifts consulting on weekends. These weekend consulting jobs Mom said you took because you preferred work to family. My oldest held up contract after contract. They were all just for money. For us. I nodded, unable to speak. The youngest picked through a stack of receipts, his hands trembling. The computer equipment. The coding boot camps. The conference in Silicon Valley you said my scholarship covered. There was no scholarship, was there? You had the talent, I managed. You just needed the opportunities. I wanted you to focus on learning, not on how to pay for it. My daughter sank onto the couch, clutching a packet of letters bound with a rubber band. These are recommendation letters. For my medical school applications. From professors at your firm, from clients, from... She looked up, tears streaming. You called in every favor you had. You deserved those opportunities, I said. Everything I wrote was true about your abilities. I just opened doors that were already within your reach. While telling us none of it. My oldest's voice broke. While letting us think you didn't care, that work mattered more than us. Your mother asked me not to tell you about the financial struggles. She said it would stress you out, make you feel guilty. She wanted you to focus on your futures without burden. I looked around at the scattered evidence of my life's work. I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought if I could just provide, just make sure you had everything you needed, that would be enough. But we needed you there, my daughter sobbed. That's what Mom always said. That you chose work over us. I was there every moment I could be. I rearranged cases to make your big events. I remember every single recital, every game. The memories flooded back, sharp and painful. Your piano recital when you were 12, you played Chopin. I was there. You wore a green dress. My daughter's eyes widened. I remember Mom saying you missed it. That you had some important client dinner. I took the client to your recital, I said. Convinced him it would be a nice cultural evening. I was in the back row because we arrived late, but I was there. I've been to every important moment I possibly could. The championship soccer game. My youngest looked stricken. Mom said you were too busy. But you were there. I flew back early from a conference. Took a red-eye, went straight to the field. You scored 2 goals. I was so proud I nearly fell out of the bleachers cheering. I smiled at the memory, then felt it crumble. Your mother was on the opposite side of the field. I waved to her, but she turned away. My oldest sat down heavily. She rewrote everything. Every memory we had. Why didn't you fight back? My daughter asked. Why didn't you tell us the truth? Because you're her children too. Because I didn't want you to have to choose sides or think poorly of your mother. Because... I paused, the weight of it all crushing. Because I thought my love didn't need defending. I thought you'd just know. The youngest pulled out another stack of papers. These are birthday cards. Dozens of them. All addressed to us, none of them ever mailed. I'd forgotten about those. Your mother said you were too old for cards from your father. That it would embarrass you in front of your friends. So I wrote them anyway, just never sent them. My daughter took one addressed to her, dated 3 years ago. She opened it, reading aloud through tears. My brilliant girl, I know I don't say it enough, but watching you pursue your dreams makes every sacrifice worthwhile. You're going to change lives. You already changed mine. Love always, Dad." She looked up. "I needed this. That year was so hard, and I thought you didn't even notice I was struggling." "I noticed everything. I spread my hands helplessly. I didn't know how to reach you anymore. Your mother said you kids needed space, that I hovered too much, asked too many questions. So I stepped back and just tried to support from a distance." "She isolated you from us," my oldest said, the realization dawning. "Year by year, she cut the connections until we only saw you through her lens." My phone buzzed. Then theirs did too. Text messages from their mother. "I don't know what lies your father is telling you, but remember who was actually there for you growing up. Don't let him manipulate you now that he's alone." The irony would have been funny if it wasn't so devastating. My daughter showed me her screen. She's been texting since we found the boxes. Trying to explain it away, justify it. "You don't have to show me," I said quietly. "No, Dad. We do." My oldest's jaw set with determination. "We've spent 3 months ignoring you, believing we were righteous. We clapped at your humiliation. We need to face what we did." The intervention came 2 weeks later, though I didn't know to call it that at the time. My children asked me to meet them at a restaurant, neutral ground, my daughter explained carefully, as if I were a skittish animal that might bolt. I arrived early, watching through the window as they gathered outside. They stood in a tight cluster, my oldest apparently giving some kind of pep talk. My daughter kept wiping her eyes. The youngest nodded along, hands shoved deep in his pockets. Whatever they'd planned, it weighed heavily. When they finally entered, their faces were determined masks barely holding back emotion. We ordered food no one ate. The waitress, sensing the tension, left us alone after delivering drinks. "We hired a lawyer," my oldest began without preamble, "to review the divorce settlement." I set down my water glass carefully. "Why?" "Because it wasn't fair," my daughter said fiercely. "She took half of everything, but you'd been supporting all of us, paying for our educations, covering expenses she claimed as her own contributions. The lawyer says we might be able to." "No." They all stared at me. "I don't want to fight it. The settlement is done. Your mother got exactly what the law entitled her to." "Dad, she lied about everything." My youngest's voice rose, then fell at my look. "She manipulated us into hating you. She planned your humiliation. She cheated for years. You can't just let her get away with it." "I'm not letting her get away with anything. I'm choosing not to spend whatever time I have left fighting battles that won't change what happened." I looked at each of them. "The money doesn't matter. It never did. I earned it to give you all better lives. Whether it went directly to you or through your mother to you, the purpose was the same." "It matters because it was based on lies," my oldest insisted. "She presented herself as the long-suffering spouse when she was planning to leave you for years. The lawyer says emotional manipulation, infidelity, fraud, there are grounds to revisit everything." And what would that accomplish? More anger? More pain? Dragging all of this through courts and depositions? I shook my head. "I'm 63 years old. I don't want to spend the next year of my life relitigating my marriage. I want to spend it building something new." My daughter reached across the table, taking my hand. "We want to build something new too. With you. But we need to make this right first. You can't make it right by punishing your mother. That's not how this works." "Then how does it work?" my youngest asked desperately. "How do we fix what we did?" We stood there and clapped. "Dad. We believed every lie she told us. We thought we were supporting her escape from a bad marriage, but we were just," his voice cracked. "We were accessories to her cruelty." The restaurant sounds faded, clinking silverware, murmured conversations, soft music. All I could hear was the pain in my children's voices. "You were her children, trusting your mother. That's not a crime. That's not even a mistake." I squeezed my daughter's hand. She spent years building a narrative. You had no reason to doubt her. We had every reason, my oldest said bitterly. The cards you sent that she lost. The times you supposedly forgot events we later learned you attended. The money she said came from her inheritance or her work when it came from you. If we'd paid attention, if we'd asked questions. You were living your lives. As you should have been. I interrupted gently. Children aren't supposed to investigate their parents' marriage. You're not supposed to fact-check your mother's claims about your father. You trusted, and that trust was exploited. But that's on her, not you. We still hurt you, my daughter whispered. We abandoned you when you needed us most. How can you just forgive that? The question hung in the air. How could I explain that forgiveness wasn't even necessary? That my love for them wasn't conditional on their perfect understanding or loyalty? Do you know what I thought about during those 3 months? I asked. When none of you called, when I sat in my apartment wondering if I'd ever hear your voices again. They shook their heads, faces pale. I thought about the first time I held each of you. How impossibly small you were, how terrifying it was to be responsible for something so precious. I thought about teaching you to ride bikes, to swim, to drive. I thought about your graduations, your triumphs, your heartbreaks. I thought about every moment that made me grateful to be your father. I paused, gathering myself. And I thought about how none of that changed just because you believed lies about me. You were still my children. I was still your father. That's not something that can be broken by misunderstanding or manipulation. My oldest covered his face with his hands. We don't deserve that. Love isn't about deserving. It's not a transaction or a reward for good behavior. It just is. I looked at each of them. I'm not angry at you. I'm heartbroken that you were put in a position where you had to choose sides, where your understanding of your childhood was weaponized against all of us. But angry? No. Mom's relationship with Richard fell apart, my daughter said quietly. 2 weeks after she moved in with him. Turns out he was also seeing 2 other women. She called me, crying, saying she'd made a terrible mistake. How did you respond? I told her she had. My daughter's voice was steady now. I told her she'd destroyed a good man and turned his children against him based on lies. I told her I needed space to process what she'd done. She's trying to rewrite this too, my youngest added. Saying Richard manipulated her, that she's a victim of his deception. Our aunt, her sister, called her out on it. Said she's been watching Mom systematically poison us against you for years. I absorbed this. My former sister-in-law, speaking truth. How is your mother now? They exchanged glances. You still care about her, my oldest said wonderingly. After everything, you still care if she's okay. She's the mother of my children. We had 3 decades together. Not all of it was a lie, even if the end was. I sighed. I don't wish her harm. I just wish she'd chosen honesty. 6 months after my retirement party, I hosted Thanksgiving dinner in my small apartment. It was cramped with all of us there, my 3 children, my oldest girlfriend, my daughter's fiancé, a kind man I was just getting to know, and surprisingly, my former sister-in-law, who'd reached out to apologize for not seeing what her sister had been doing. The turkey was too dry, the mashed potatoes slightly lumpy. None of us cared. Remember the Thanksgivings at the old house? My daughter asked, passing roles. Mom would spend days preparing everything perfectly, and we'd sit at that formal dining table like we were in a magazine spread. And Dad would always be late from work, my youngest added, then stopped. Except you probably weren't, were you? That was another narrative. Actually, I was often late, I admitted. But usually because I was picking up the specific wine your mother requested from the one store across town that carried it, or the particular type of cranberry sauce she insisted on. Small errands she'd ask me to handle that somehow always took longer than expected. My former sister-in-law shook her head. She always had a gift for making her requests seem reasonable while ensuring they'd make you look bad. I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner. None of us did, my oldest girlfriend said. She'd been quiet most of the evening, still getting comfortable. I mean, I only heard the version where your dad was the workaholic who ignored his family. When they told me the truth. She glanced at my oldest. It changed how I see a lot of things. Like what? I asked, genuinely curious. Like sacrifice. Like how love sometimes looks boring or absent from the outside because it's busy keeping everything running behind the scenes. She smiled at me. You're kind of my hero, actually. The words nearly broke me. I focused on cutting turkey, blinking hard. My daughter raised her glass. I want to propose a toast. We all lifted our drinks, wine, water, cider. To second chances. To truth. To the Father who never stopped loving us, even when we stopped believing in Him. To Dad, they chorused, and we drank. Later, after the dishes were cleaned and the leftovers distributed, my children lingered while their partners excused themselves to the living room. We have something for you, my youngest said. He pulled out a leather-bound book. We've been working on it for months. I opened it carefully. The first page held a photo of me holding my oldest as a newborn, my face a mixture of terror and wonder. Each subsequent page contained photos, letters, memories, all annotated with newly understood context. Dad at my 5th grade science fair. I thought he looked bored. Now I realize he'd driven through a snowstorm to get there, had stayed up helping me build the volcano the night before, and was probably exhausted. He stayed for the entire event, asking questions about every project, not just mine. The summer Dad forgot about our beach trip. Turns out he'd been laid off and was scrambling to find new work so we wouldn't lose the house. He didn't come to the beach because he was interviewing for 3 jobs in 2 days. He got hired and never mentioned any of it. Christmas when I was 16. I was furious Dad gave me just a card with a savings bond. I didn't know until this year that he'd lost a major client that fall and money was desperately tight. That savings bond matured and paid for my first year of graduate school. Page after page of memories, recontextualized with truth. My vision blurred. We can't give you back those 3 months, my daughter said softly. We can't undo applauding at your humiliation. But we can bear witness to who you really are. Who you've always been. And we can make sure that from now on, you never have to sacrifice in silence, my oldest added. We're adults. We can handle truth. We want to handle it, together. My youngest nodded. No more protecting us from reality. We're a family. That means we carry things together. I looked at my children, really looked at them. They'd grown into remarkable people despite the manipulation they'd endured, maybe even partly because of it. They'd learned to question narratives, to seek truth, to value authenticity over comfort. Your mother called me yesterday, I said quietly. They tensed. She wanted to know if I'd consider reconciliation. She said she's been in therapy, that she realizes she's sabotaged the best thing in her life. What did you say? My daughter asked carefully. I said I forgave her for my own peace, but that forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. That chapter is closed. I paused. I also said that she should focus on rebuilding her relationship with you 3, if you're open to it. That you deserve a mother who's honest, even if that honesty is painful. We're taking it slowly, my oldest said. She's in therapy, which is good. But trust, that's going to take years, if it ever fully comes back. That's wise. I closed the memory book, pressing my hand to its cover. Thank you for this. For all of it. We're just getting started, my youngest grinned. Next month, we're planning a do-over retirement party. Just us, some of your actual friends, maybe your old boss. A celebration that honors who you really are. We're also starting a new tradition, my daughter added. Sunday dinners. Every week, we rotate who cooks. No excuses. No cancellations unless it's an emergency. We've lost enough time. I looked around my modest apartment, at these 3 beautiful people who'd found their way back to me through the rubble of lies. The view from my window showed the lake, sunset painting the water gold and orange. You know what I realized? I said. At that retirement party, when everything fell apart, I thought my life was ending. The career was over, the marriage was over, my children hated me. I thought I'd lost everything that mattered. And now? My oldest asked. Now I realize I was being given a gift, though a brutal one. The lies burned away, the performance ended, and what remained was truth. Painful, yes, but real. I smiled at them. I have my children back. Not because I'm perfect or because I did everything right, but because love is stronger than manipulation. Truth is more powerful than lies. And family, real family, survives the fire. My daughter wiped her eyes. We love you, Dad. I love you too. I always have. I always will. Outside, the sun completed its descent, and the first stars appeared. Inside, my apartment filled with laughter as someone suggested a game, and my youngest's phone played music, and my former sister-in-law told embarrassing stories from my children's youth that even they hadn't heard. The retirement party had been meant to end one chapter of my life. Instead, it had cleared the ground for something better, something built on truth instead of secrets, on presence instead of distance, on love that didn't need defending because it simply existed, constant as the sunrise, patient as the years. I'd spent 4 decades building a foundation for my family. I'd thought it had crumbled to nothing. But foundations don't disappear. Sometimes they're just buried beneath lies and misunderstanding, waiting to be rediscovered. And when they are, when the truth finally emerges, what gets built on them the second time is stronger for having survived the test. My children had begged for my forgiveness. I'd given it freely because that's what love does. But the real gift wasn't my forgiveness, it was theirs, extended to themselves, learning to carry truth without shame and to build futures unburdened by inherited lies. The retirement I'd imagined, quiet, solitary, reflective, had transformed into something I never expected. A new beginning, surrounded by people who finally saw me clearly and chose to stay anyway. Not despite my flaws and failures, but because love, real love, embraces the whole person, imperfections included. As laughter filled my small apartment and my children planned next week's dinner, I realized that everything I'd worked for, every sacrifice I'd made, had finally come full circle. Not in the way I'd imagined, but in the way that mattered most. In the sound of my children's voices, the warmth of their presence, and the certainty that whatever came next, we'd face it together. The party that was meant to destroy me had, in the end, set us all free.